Hamish. Hamish is one of our students who is multitasking today. He's going to give an acknowledgement of country.
We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the country of the Darug people of the Darug Nation. We acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We seek to live in harmony with our Indigenous friends as we relax in God's grace shown in Jesus' life, death and resurrection. We treasure this land, its sunburned beauty and its rugged mountain ranges. We acknowledge God's rule over his creation and stand in awe of his greatness.
Thanks, Hamish. Jonathan. Jonathan Hoffman is the senior pastor from Windsor District Baptist Church, a pretty damn good church, I might say. It's my church. So welcome, Jonathan.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Macquarie Candidate Forum. Special welcome to our candidates. Maybe we can give them a round of applause. Thank them for being here. Welcome to those of you who've journeyed out this evening. It's great to see you here. Welcome to those who are joining us either as this event is happening or else afterwards. We're glad you took time to view these proceedings tonight. If you can't tell by the accent that I come up here with, which is quite thick, I am not originally from this great land, but I have been a citizen of Australia for the past 10 years, and it's a privilege that I consider really quite great to be a part of this country. And in a moment, I'm going to exercise some of my civil liberty in praying according to my faith, and I'll invite you to do the same. But I was also invited to kind of set a tone for tonight. We are meeting in a Christian school, and if you are someone of a Christian faith like myself, you would understand that freedom is a privilege, and that government is a blessed gift of God, and that as Christians we acknowledge, even as God in his sovereignty establishes governance, it's our joy and privilege to submit to them and to listen to them. And what a privilege we have to be a part of this process, this democratic process. We are also going to be hearing from people tonight. I know there's going to be people from various backgrounds and various opinions. And I thought I might give us a little encouragement. Lately I've been reading about wisdom. And I trust we're gathered here tonight to learn from wisdom. Learn some wisdom, and I thought I'd just share a couple of proverbs to frame our discussion. The first one that I'd like to share with you is Proverbs 18, verse 15, and I trust it hopefully encapsulates the spirit with which you came here tonight. It says this: "The mind of the discerning acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks it." And I love this proverb because it speaks to what we're doing tonight. We're coming to acquire knowledge, to discern what we feel is the best way forward. And we're going to do that by listening. There's a sense in the scripture and in wisdom in general that we grow as we listen. Which leads me to one of my other favorite proverbs, one that unfortunately has suited me many times. And I hope it doesn't describe many of us tonight. Also from Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2, it says, "A fool does not delight in understanding, but only wants to show off his or her opinions." And so it's a reminder to us tonight that we will gain more discernment by listening than by hearing the sounds of our own voice. And so I invite you now to pray with me, if you like, as I ask God to bless this gathering. Almighty God in heaven, I give thanks to you tonight for minds to think, for hearts that seek, for ears to hear, and for mouths to speak. God, I pray that you would bless this gathering tonight, that we would come ready to listen, ready to ask, ready to understand. God, I pray that you would bring clarity for those who feel confused. I pray you would strengthen and give conviction to those who feel unsure. God, most of all, we ask your will be done. And as our Lord Jesus said, may those of us who have ears to hear be those who hear. We pray this in his name. Amen. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Jonathan. I am going to apologise up front because I'm going to sound much like a principal. First of all, for those who don't know me, my name is Bill Rusin. I am the principal at Kuyper Christian School. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our school for this event, so we can hear from those who wish to represent our electorate in the Federal Parliament. We're very thankful for the time each one of you have taken to attend this event. And especially I want to thank our candidates, Susan Templeman, Terry Morgan, Mike Creed, and Matthew Jacobson for attending, as well as Joe Fay, who is the SEO of CEN schools in New South Wales and ACT. Vanessa Cheng intends to be here. She's not here yet. She's busy in Campbelltown at the moment, but she hopes to get here. And Jonathan is here from our church, and Rick Hall from Richmond Anglican Church is here as well. There may be others that who I haven't met. Is that better? And I apologise if I have missed your name. And I also want to thank the staff at Kuyper who are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. To the candidates, the Christian community is grateful for the hard work politicians put in to govern our country. And we wish to afford the proper respect to those who seek this office. A time like this is a place where there is a contest of ideas and things can get heated. But I encourage you always to be respectful, even when you might disagree, which I'm sure will happen, even strongly. I say that to us as an audience as well. To our politicians, I'd ask you that when you speak, please keep what you say about your position. What you say is about your position on the matter, and not comment on other positions, so that you can speak uninterrupted, and so can others. Sorry about the principally bit. We will try to avoid questions that will be seen as gotcha questions. And to our audience, I would ask that each of you give all of our politicians the respect by not interjecting, not engaging in any activity that might be seen as a function of your displeasure to any of them. We will be using Slido, I don't even know what that is, to get questions from the floor. And people will be able to interact and say that you would like to see a particular question raised. Please note that we might edit the questions. Sometimes the question may not be clear, or the question might be awkward or pointed at a particular person. If needed, we will actually reshape the question so it's not pointed at anybody or any party in particular. Most importantly, bathrooms. That way. Could you please also make sure that you put your phones on silent? It's nothing worse than seeing people scrabble for their phones when they go off. In the event of an incident, I'm going to stick my hands up in the air and say, run for your lives. No, I won't do that. we have multiple exits here at the sides. The back is a little bit more difficult. It's very unlikely that we'll require you to evacuate early, but you need to know that's where we go. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to give some opening comments. And I've lost my second sheet of paper. Here it is. Then there will be some set questions that each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to state their position. And then we will have the questions that will come on Slido. And for each one of those, there will be 2 minutes to answer. So they will need to be succinct. And we have a bell. So when you hear the first ding, you know that, like that, you know you've got 30 seconds left. In a previous school, we used to use Nerf guns, and the click was 30 seconds, and the shot would come. We're not doing anything as exciting as that, sorry. At the end of the questions, I'll just wrap things up and Rick will come and pray for us. Our hope is to be finished by 9 p.m. You are welcome to grab tea and coffee. There's a few little bits and pieces to eat at your table. There's water there for you as well. So, we are now going to hear from each of the candidates, and we may as well go in this direction. There is nothing, we're going right to left, actually, depends upon which way you walk, it doesn't matter. So, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Creed. I'm the Liberal candidate here in Macquarie. 2 minutes is a very short time to give you a full background about me and my life. So I only just live up the road. I live up at Slopes Road in the Slopes. I was born and raised here in Macquarie. I grew up in the Lower Mountains. I went to Blaxland East Public School and Blaxland High School. I used to go to St David's Anglican Church and their Sunday school up there. I've been involved in many local community organisations, sporting groups, all that sort of stuff. I will address the elephant in the room at the beginning of the night. I am a happily married gay man, and I do have my own Christian faith. Some people think that's a bit of an oxymoron, but I don't. I was, as I said, raised Church of England. I am a product of both public and Christian schooling. I stuck my hand up for this because I think that if you are tired of seeing what happens, you need to get involved and actually try and have a crack at it. My mum was on council up in the Blue Mountains for 10 years, and I watched her and the way she dealt with community issues. So I've learnt from her that even if it goes against my own party, if there's something that's not right, you put your hand up and you say it. And if successful on Saturday, that's exactly what I would do. I would turn around and probably upset quite a few people in my own political party. But I believe that at the end of the day, I live here. I've lived here pretty much all my life, bar a few years down the hill in Penrith, so don't hold that against me. But, you know, at the end of the day, I will probably end up living and dying in this community because I love it. The reason I'm down in the Hawkesbury is because I have a habit of rescuing animals, so I needed acreage, so I rent.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me here. My name's Terry Morgan. I'm the candidate for the Greens for the electorate of Macquarie. I live in Blackheath. Been there for about 10 years. Although most of I was born in Manchester, of all places, but came to Australia as a child migrant, and have lived here ever since. But thing that really changed my life was Straight out of university, and I'd done a teaching degree, I was recruited to go and teach in the remote Northern Territory. And I must have liked it because I stayed about 30 years in different communities, East Arnhem Land, the Western Desert, the Cape and Gulf. And I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't had that experience. My kids grew up in those places. I have three adult kids, 6 grandkids, and I know I don't look old enough, but I'm going to become a great grandfather in August. So those things actually motivate me. It's one of the reasons I belong to the Greens. I think looking after the planet and making sure there's a decent world for future generations to live in is perhaps the most important thing we can do. I still consider myself an educator, although I'm not gainfully employed these days. I still get emails from New South Wales Department of Education offering me permanent teaching positions in various desirable locations, but I think I'm past that at the age of 74. But anyway, thank you again for having me here, and I'm happy to talk about my views and the Greens' policies on education. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Susan Templeman, the current member for Macquarie. I can say that for at least a few more days. Look, my very safe family life changed for me when I was 17 and I went to live in Mexico as a Rotary Exchange student. And that opened my eyes to inequality from a gender perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And I saw poverty like I didn't know existed. So I came back to Australia after that experience and wanted to change the world and became a journalist. And I spent a decade as a journalist working initially in the Canberra Press Gallery for commercial radio. And that was the second term of the Hawke government. So I saw a lot of really good things being done to try and make this country a fairer place. I then went to New York for a year and London for a few years and worked as a foreign correspondent there, but came back to Australia to have my kids and settled in the Blue Mountains in Winmalee, which is where I've been now for nearly 35 years. And I found that being a mum of a newborn and journalism, news journalism, where you dropped everything to run to a story, were not very compatible. So I changed and set up my own business over time, juggling like many mums do, having their own business and raising kids and working it around my children. And it was actually my daughter's experience with mental illness that led me into politics, and I think that story is well known. And I'm very proud that in the last 9 years I've been able to serve this community one way or another, including improving adolescent mental health services and adult mental health services. But I couldn't do that without an incredible team that I have around me, and also a very supportive family. My husband of nearly 40 years, I don't know how he puts up with it, but he knows that we're doing this as a team to try and problem solve the things that are happening. So I'm very grateful to have the privilege and happy to take questions tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Matthew Jacobson. I'm the federal candidate for One Nation. I just wanted to thank the organizers of tonight for Ruth and Bill and the team that's here. Thank you very much for extending the invitation to all the candidates. It's much appreciated. And I also wanted to say a very big thank you to the audience. I know it wasn't a very nice day out there today, with it being cold and gray. Thank you for coming out and listening to my fellow candidates and I share our views and our vision, not only for the electorate of Macquarie, but also for Australia. So again, my name's Matt. I live in Wentworth Falls. I've recently retired after 20 years of public service as a school principal. I was also an officer in the Australian Army Reserves, and now I'm a small business owner, and I have a consulting and advocacy service for children and young people and their families around the idea of disability. Beyond this, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend, and I'm a community member. And I was very, very fortunate to grow up in a time and a place where the adults in my life were able to put aside their religious differences and really distill and focus on what the most important things were when it comes to our community, educating my friends and I according to our faith. And we learned about the gospel. We learned about the good news, because we know in the book of John, chapter 3, verse 16, you guys are falling asleep, where God tells us, or we're told that God, he so loved the world that he gave his only son so that we could, those who believe in him can live forever and we won't perish. And it's that belief that has me, it's seen me through the good times, it's seen me through the tough times, and it's the reason that I'm sitting in front of you tonight. And if you vote for me, I will continue to fight for our religious freedoms, because I believe that they're under attack. And I won't just fight for my Christian brothers and sisters, but I'll fight for everyone of faith and good conscience, especially for the voices that aren't heard. The over 80,000 Australian children that are killed by abortion needlessly each year. Thank you.
All right, we've come to the time where we have some set questions. There is a preamble that will be played on the screens, and then the question will be asked. So, Hamish, are we ready with those? The first one? Wonderful.
Religious freedom isn't just about what we believe in the privacy of our own homes. It's about the right to express those beliefs, to speak openly, to practice freely, and even to hold and express views that are unpopular. It also means not being forced to say or do things that are against our faith. And this isn't just a nice idea, it's a human right protected under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, including the freedom to worship, practice, and even teach our beliefs, whether in public or in private, by ourselves or as a group. It also says that every parent has the right to teach what they believe to their children and have them educated in their faith. Australia is a signatory to this international covenant, and it is legislated as one of the 7 core international human rights treaties that Australia has adopted. Despite this, we have no national laws that protect religious freedom. Instead, we rely on a patchwork of laws that usually mention religion as an afterthought and often as an exemption rather than as a positive right. Right now, religious freedom is under great pressure. Beliefs that have been consistently taught for thousands of years are starting to be defined as harmful or bigoted, and laws are being enacted that restrict these teachings in the name of inclusiveness and protecting people from harm. For example, proposals for vilification legislation have been drafted with a new subjective test where the mere expression of a religious belief could be punished if a person from a protected group might consider it harmful. In Victoria, laws have been made that make certain prayers illegal, and a government commission has a website listing what prayers are acceptable and what ones are not. Those laws could see parents punished for simply encouraging their child to follow religious teachings on gender and sexuality. Companies have followed the example of our governments, and people have lost their jobs or been punished at work for expressing their beliefs, or even simply because of what church they went to. Try to silence religious beliefs does not create a more inclusive society. Instead, it creates one that excludes people of faith. Australia needs a government that understands the importance of religious freedom and protects the rights for all people to respectfully debate and disagree on these most fundamental issues. Will you protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression, and conscience, and the right for parents to raise and educate their children in accordance with their faith?
You're first.
It's a good question to kick the night off with. I will just start straight up and just say yes. We in this country have been raised, and it was founded on Christian beliefs, and it's served us well over the last over 200 years. Freedom of religion, to me, is a fundamental human right. Whether you're a Christian, you practice Hinduism, Muslim, it's your right as a human being in this country. So pretty much, I've said it, yes, I will absolutely protect someone's religious freedom, even if it goes against, or someone disagrees with it. At the end of the day, we're a country where you should be able to freely express your faith without persecution.
Thank you. Yes, the expression of individual religious belief is protected. It should be. There is a caveat there, though. If your expression of religious belief doesn't concur with somebody else's, it doesn't give you the right to impose yours on other people. So, providing the broad spectrum of human rights is respected, then there should be no problem in expressing your religious beliefs. And I'd certainly support that.
Labor has said that we recognise, respect and will protect the right of parents to send kids to religious schools, and that can be because of the beliefs and values that that student and parent body share. To that end, religious schools must be allowed to continue to build their community of faith and to maintain that community of faith, including by giving preference to teachers and staff who are of the same faith. We also, at the same time, want to see no student or member of staff discriminated against because of who they are. Our approach to this is to support it in have bipartisanship around it. In other words, to have a consensus around how we move forward on this. There has been division in this country about many social things, and we don't think that religion is something where division should be a part of the discussion. So the bipartisanship is key, and our efforts to enhance anti-discrimination protections were not given bipartisanship by the opposition, which is why they haven't progressed, and the Prime Minister's been really clear about that. So I hope that in the next Parliament this is something that we will be able to progress, because both major parties see the need for it and want to work together to build a consensus about how we do that.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to be a little stinker here and move this stand because I feel like we're going to wreck our necks. Is that all right? I can gaze upon you now. So, religious freedom is foundational to a free society, and every person has the right to believe, speak, and live out their lives according to their conscience. And as a parent and as a person of faith, I think this is especially important when it comes to how we raise and we educate our own kids. And religious freedom is also very much a core issue for One Nation. We believe that religious freedom is a living practice that needs to be actively defended. Parents must have the right to raise their children with the values without interference from the government or from policies. And increasingly, as Christians in particular, we're seeing an attack on these beliefs and around silencing prayer and also penalizing public faith. When we look at what some of the other parties purport, the Greens, you'll notice that they will claim to support religious freedom, but they've supported policies like safe access zones and silence pro-life advocates. The Labour has a strong proponent of. Oh, I beg your pardon. I came here. Sorry, I'm a big proponent of freedom of speech. I feel very strongly about some of these issues, and I'll summarize it like this. One, I'll apologize. I'm very sorry to our members that I was naming some of the other policies. I will say fervently that I believe in people's religious freedoms and being able to express themselves. I believe that it's really important that laws aren't crafted in a way that isn't honest with the public. They shouldn't be crafted in a way that if somebody was pro-life, that they should be blocked from safe zones where they aren't able to advocate for pro-life ideologies. And also, when we have a government here that is, sorry, I'll back up. One Nation is very pro-life. We are not in alignment with the beliefs of our current government, which I hope I'm not going to get in trouble here with the principal for donating a considerable amount of money to abortion advocacy. And also, specifically at the moment, what One Nation is standing up for is the law is that abortion is legal from conception through till birth. And now it's being pushed even further that there are laws that are being looked to pass through that say if you are a conscientious objector, if you are a person of faith and you don't offer those abortion services when asked, you are breach of the law. Thank you.
You're skating on thin ice there, young man. I'm sure I'm older than him. So we're ready for the second one, and people have actually partially answered this, but we'll play the second preamble and question.
Freedom of religion doesn't just include individual religious belief and practice. It protects our ability to worship and live out our faith together as a group. This means religious communities must have the freedom to gather, worship, teach, and serve. This is part of freedom of association, the right to gather together with people who share the same beliefs as you. Part of this right is the ability to create institutions based on faith. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples, so people can gather and worship together. But faith isn't just about worship. We also need to build schools so we can educate our children in line with our faith, and charities so we can live out our faith by caring for others. Australia has a rich history of being blessed by faith-based institutions. Many of our largest charities, hospitals, shelters, aged care and aid, were founded as expressions of faith and still operate today because of their faith identity. Equally, the very first schools in Australia were founded by the church, and today 1 in 3 parents choose to send their child to a faith-based school, and that number is growing. These institutions serve all Australians, regardless of background, but they fundamentally remain religious organisations, built on faith, guided by faith, and successful because of our faith. But all this has been put under threat by governments and legislation that are trying to force religious organisations to compromise on their beliefs or prevent them from running their institutions according to their convictions. One of the most serious areas of pressure is employment and appointment of volunteers. At both state and federal level, laws have been introduced or proposed that would prevent faith-based organisations from preferencing employees who share and live out that organisation's faith. Our institutions are about our people. To be a faith-based school or charity, we need people who not only say they believe our faith, but who live it out in everything they do. Faith-based charities are not just service providers. They're mission-driven organisations that serve others because of their faith. Schools and colleges don't just teach curriculum, they help to shape and form students' characters in a set of values and beliefs. And Australians are increasingly choosing to send their children to schools who form their students based on faith. And school staff, executives, and teachers and support staff are the people who set that culture. Australia is greatly blessed by our faith-based institutions, educational, charities, and places of worship. But none of this can happen unless they can choose to employ people who uphold and live out their faith. So, will you protect the right of faith-based organisations, including charities and educational institutions, to operate according to their faith. This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith.
In principle, yes, although I do have a few reservations about the kind of tenor of this question. One of them being, of course, if you have a faith-based institution like a school, you're going to want to look for staff who share your beliefs and your philosophies, etc. You're not always going to be able to find them, though. I have actually taught in a Catholic school, and I'm not a Catholic, and it wasn't a great problem for me or for the school, I hope. But there are issues, and there have been times, I think, when people's expression of their religious communal faith or belief has discriminated against people, including people losing their jobs, because it's been discovered that their sexuality or their politics or some other action is, some other feature is offensive to the religious community. I think there is a broader community acceptance of non-discrimination that needs to be adhered to, but it is very difficult to make laws and strict regulations about this kind of thing, and it really needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But I wouldn't be able to give a blanket guarantee that any expression of an institution's adherence to its faith that affected another person would be all right. I think things like this need conversation, they need understanding, they need dialogue. And I can see possible situations where I would not be able to accept, for example, the termination of somebody's employment in a faith-based institution because something had been discovered about them that was not acceptable to the institution. But I think these things are rare, but I also think that faith-based institutions have to recognise that there are non-faith-based people as well. There are people who are not religious, and they have rights too. Yeah, that's it.
Just as we think there needs to be additions to the law to protect individual freedom of expression and religious freedom, we also think that there needs to be a change to protect faith-based organisations to be able to operate according to their faith. And that's the draft legislation that we developed in the last 3 years. And it was consistent with the Prime Minister's commitment on this before the 2022 election. So that legislation would have prevented discrimination against people of faith and maintained the right of religious schools to preference people of their faith in the selection of staff. We believe in and support all Australians' rights to have and to manifest their religion, their beliefs, their tenets, and to be able to operate in line with their doctrines. And we would really like, in the next Parliament, I would really like to see that whoever is there is able to progress this legislation in a kind and caring way so that we can do it without there being divisions caused over it. This is something we should be able to find a pathway forward on. And it'll take working with all of those who get elected.
Thank you. I think there's a difference between discrimination and allowing faith-based organizations to hire according to their belief systems. I think we all need to absolutely shun discrimination, but I think we also need to allow religious institutions to hire people that are going to stand with their ethos and their background. I think it goes without saying, as a Roman Catholic, I probably wouldn't be a good fit just intellectually in working in, say, a Jewish school. And I'm not picking on a Jewish school for any reason, but I'd probably want to run around and say he's actually the Messiah, and I'd find myself in a lot of trouble. Faith-based organizations are pillars of our community, and One Nation stands firmly for their right to operate without government interference, and for preserving their religious integrity and contributions to society. We also strongly support the autonomy of faith-based organizations, including schools, charities, and churches, to operate in alignment with their religious convictions. One Nation, we also advocate for the right of these organizations to employ staff who share and uphold their faith-based values, ensuring the integrity of their missions. We oppose any legislation that would compel religious institutions to act contrary to their beliefs, viewing such mandates as infringements on their religious liberty.
So I think the general question is that if faith-based organisations cannot operate according to its beliefs, what is the point of having faith-based organisations? And, you know, as the, odd one out here, everyone's talking about, if there was a sexuality found or anything like that. Personally, I think that if someone was gay, they wouldn't go and normally go to get hired at a faith-based organisation. If the shoe was on the other foot, if it was a gay organisation and you had a deeply religious person applying for the job, I don't think the gay organisation would hire that person. But here in this country, we seem to have had a long-standing gap when it comes to enshrining religious freedoms and faith in this country. We don't seem to have, it seems to be almost like a taboo subject. We can pass laws for discrimination against almost every other group except for faith-based organisations. The Liberal Party went to put forward one in the last term of government. Unfortunately, other parties didn't come on board, and the reason they didn't put that through was because they didn't want to pass a bad bill. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that legislation that we pass actually works for everyone. I mean, we talk about discrimination. In the last 48 hours, I've been discriminated against because people on my campaign team are helping a gay candidate and they're Christian. And it's apparently abhorrent that that would even happen. I have had my sexuality dragged through Facebook community pages. I've had the fact that I haven't asked every single volunteer that I have what their religion is. I wouldn't ask them what their sexuality is. I wouldn't ask them what their ethnicity is. If I did that outside of this, I'd be getting dragged before a discrimination court. The fact that apparently I'm supposed to be asking my volunteers what their religion is, to me is absurd, and is just one of the lowest forms of tactics I've ever seen in an election campaign. I'm very happy the support that I've gotten from the community, whether they're Christian, Greek Orthodox, atheist, agnostic. To me, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm just grateful that I've been able to get the support that I've gotten. And I think we seem to forget that we're all human. We all have our differences and we all have our faiths, and we need to be respectful of each other, and we just don't seem to have that lately, and that's what I want to see come back.
The next question is coming from me. My preamble will be a lot shorter, I think. We are grateful for our government's commitment to funding education for all students and their support for capital works related to education. We're meeting in a hall tonight funded by the federal government as part of the Building the Education Revolution in 2011. Just last year, we were able to install some solar panels to minimise our carbon footprint and to lower our costs. And again, we're deeply grateful for this support. On the other hand, it is somewhat frustrating for schools like ours that the debate surrounding funding independent education is largely framed in terms of over-resourced elite schools, where in fact the larger proportion of independent schools are much more like us. Recent stats are 60% of all independent school students come from low to middle income families. Independent schools receive on average from the federal government $12,160 per student in government funding compared to $22,510 that is sent to the state for public school students. And schools like Kuyper charge all-inclusive fees on average below $6,000 a year. This low fee approach is a commitment of schools like ours to help keep Christian education affordable for parents who choose to send them to a school like this. So my question is, do you support sustainable recurrent funding and increased capital funding for Christian schools that reflect the real costs of education and will support appropriate growth in facilities to meet the growing demand for Christian education, particularly in growth areas?
I was very pleased more than a decade ago to be here for the opening of this hall. And I came with Senator Doug Cameron representing the Gillard government, and we were very proud of what amazing halls were delivered through that program by the independent school sector. Equally, there are amazing halls and facilities that are still in public schools that I still go to this day through that period. And yeah, wonderful to be here for the solar panels. Both of those Labor government things, because Labor believes in supporting schools based on their need. Hands up if the word Gonski means anything to you. That does date you a little bit. Because more than a decade ago, the Gillard government said we have to end this war between schools. It doesn't matter whether a school is a public school, a Catholic school, an independent school. The funding for each child at that school needs to be based on need, and that has transformed how we fund schools. The formula that was used there were agreements made with the Catholic system and with the independent system. It took till last month before we could get agreement with the states, because the states also needed to make significant contribution and up their own funding for their own students. That wasn't something at a Commonwealth level that we were willing to make as many compromises on. So I'm very proud that we have put in place a formula and something that will last us going forward that says every child, no matter the school they go to, is given funding that matches the need. Now, there will always be extra things that at a federal level we do, because capital funding does predominantly come from the federal government for independent schools. And we'll be very clear with schools. There have been several grants rounds in this term of government. I don't recall any in my previous 6 years, but that doesn't mean there weren't any. But I've been very aware of the grants rounds we've had that have allowed schools to apply for things that reduce their energy costs. All of those things like that flows through to lowering running costs and therefore easing burden on schools and families. So this is something, I think, you know, if we were having this conversation when I first started in my first election in 2010, it didn't exist. It was a real problem. Now, it will not be perfect. the way it is, because sadly nothing is, but it is a foundation for fairness and equity. And I'm very proud that that was something that Labor has driven and Labor has delivered.
I believe that every Australian child has the right to a high quality education, and I believe that all kids can succeed with the right supports, that they can succeed. And every child deserves access to a quality education. We're all taxpayers, and why when myself personally, I've had my kids go to both public and to Christian schools as well, and I don't understand why people of faith, when they pay their taxes, they should be penalized because they need that extra for their kid, the most essential part of their education. We support capital growth initiatives that aren't going to penalize Christian schools for doing well, and we stand starkly opposed for needs-based funding models because it actually penalizes schools that do well. So again, I believe every child has the right to a high-quality education, and One Nation's committed to this. Thank you.
So, as someone that actually went to public and Christian school, I went to Macquarie down in Emu Plains, although for some reason they changed their name to Penola, so a lot of ex-school students are still quite mad about that, and we haven't gotten over that yet. Unfortunately, there are people, and they're ideologically opposed for some reason to private schooling, especially Christian private schooling. The Liberals have always been supportive of Christian schools, myself personally, because I've been there, I've done that. Some of the best times of my life actually were at that school. 1 in 3 children attend Christian schools in this country. I think that what we've seen, you know, even since I think when I was a kid, and I've just turned 40, so that was, you know, only a couple of years ago, there's always been this us versus them with public school funding and Christian school funding. At the end of the day, parents should have the right to choose where they send their schools, whether it's public school or faith-based schools. And I think we're all taxpayers, and so government has a responsibility to make sure, yes, public schools are funded properly, but also Christian schools and private schools are also funded properly. If parents want to send their child to a Christian school or an independent school and they pay fees, that shouldn't be a disservice to them when they pay the same amount of taxes as everybody else. So I will always support funding of independent and Christian schools as well as public schools. And I think that we just sort of need to get over this division that seems to have crept into this country, whether it's on schooling or religion or anything else. We just seem to be getting divided all the time on choice. That's the whole point. We live here is that we have that freedom of choice of what we do with our lives, what we do with our kids, where we send them, what sports they attend, all that sort of stuff. It just seems to be always division all the time, and it doesn't need to be.
The Greens believe that federal funding of the school education system should be based on need and equity. To ensure that all Australian children receive a world-class education, we believe that struggling schools, whether public or private, should get a priority for government funding ahead of schools that already have adequate or better resources. That's why we have a policy to fully fund schools. We believe that all schools, including non-government schools, should be receiving 100% of their educational funding needs. Currently, though, 98.7% of public schools receive less than 100% of the minimum schooling resource standard funding, meaning around 2.5 million kids in Australia attend a school that is understaffed and under-resourced. I've spent probably most of my several decades of teaching in schools that were disadvantaged for various reasons, by remoteness, by community poverty, by prejudice and racism, by all sorts of things, mostly remote schools in the Northern Territory and North Queensland. Those kids are still not, those schools are still not funded to a standard which somebody from an urban, reasonably affluent urban centre in the southeast of the country would even recognise. The depths of disadvantage are huge, and they are manifold. It's not just about the provision of money for buildings and so on. It's about the prevalence of community dysfunction and so on that is caused by all sorts of long-standing factors. So we must fully fund all schools to 100% of the schooling resource standard by committing $6.8 billion over 4 years. This includes increasing the Commonwealth share to 25% of the schooling resource standard for public schools and 40% for schools in the Northern Territory, because that's how far behind they are still. We will ensure sustainable funding by indexing public school funding to the higher of the wage price index, consumer price index, or the schooling resource standard indexation factor. And we will close loopholes that disadvantage public schools by removing the Morrison era provision allowing states and territories to deduct 4% of non-school costs from their SRS funding contribution. This will restore $5 billion to the system over the forward estimates. Thank you.
Right, we are up to our last set question, and that is on gambling reform. So we're ready to play the preamble for that.
Australia is in the middle of a gambling epidemic. The figures show Australians lose per capita more than any other country in the world, a staggering $31.5 billion. In this cost of living election, it's salient to know that families are losing more to gambling than they're spending on their utility bills. More than 2 years ago, the Murphy Parliamentary Inquiry delivered a report to the government recommending, amongst other things, a full ban on gambling advertising. It's a move that polls show 72% of Australians support. So, will you, as a candidate in this federal election, commit to support the implementation of all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review? We believe it's incredibly important to protect our kids and to protect our community from gambling harm. Australia is in the middle.
Thank you. I think it's a bit short-sighted if we view the tax revenue from poker machines. It's very short-sighted when it destroys families, it destroys lives, and addiction of any sort is absolutely horrible. So, One Nation, we call for really extremely strict regulations on gambling advertisements, especially during times when children have access to them and they're exposed during live broadcasts. We support comprehensive reforms to address growing issues of gambling addiction, including enhanced support for services for affected individuals and for families. And we advocate for greater accountability from gambling companies, ensuring that they can contribute to harm reduction initiatives as well. And it's also a moment to celebrate. This is one of those occasions where the Greens and One Nation stand shoulder to shoulder in terms of eliminating this from our culture. So protecting our children from the dangers of gambling is non-negotiable. One Nation will lead the charge in implementing meaningful reforms to safeguard our communities.
Thank you for the question. Susan and I have had this a couple of times at a few forums now. I've been very upfront and very frank. We're not doing enough. Back when I was a kid, they banned cigarette advertising because of harmful impacts to your health and all that sort of stuff. My question is why we just haven't acted on this now and just banned gambling advertising on television, radio, newspapers. Kids have got access to social media devices, iPads, iPhones, all sorts of things. They play games, and you'll sit there and I'll play a game on my phone, and all of a sudden up pops a slot machine, pokey gambling ad, whether it's for an actual phone game or it's TAB or something like that. The fact is, like, none of the parties have acted quick enough on this. And again, I'll probably get a phone call in the morning going, oh, what did you say that for? Because I don't think we have acted quick enough on this. I know Susan has been on the, taken over the chair of the late Peter Murphy and the work that she was doing on gambling reform. And I've heard Susan say before that she's disappointed that that the government hasn't moved sooner on this. I'm disappointed that the opposition hasn't been more straight up and actually pushing this and backing more measures to ban gambling, especially when it comes to advertising around children. I think that is one of the most heinous things that is happening at the moment, and if I am elected, that's one of the biggest things I'll be pushing, is that I don't understand, just ban it. It's simple.
Yes. My own extended family and my wife's extended family have both been seriously affected by problem gambling. And look, gambling is a really slippery thing. I mean, not just Australians, but people everywhere. If you ban the legal forms of it, they'll find illegal ways of doing it. That's true, but that's not an excuse for ignoring it. And advertising is one area where we can have an immediate impact, especially in reducing the effect, the attraction of gambling to young people. I think there've been moves to kind of cut down the times at which sports gambling ads can be shown on the television and so on. Why do we need the things at all? I don't understand. You know, the children view television outside of what's normally considered children's viewing times. So you can't protect them just by restricting the times at which you can show gambling advertisements. The Greens would abolish all of them. Thanks.
I have become the committee chair of the Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee, which did the inquiry that Peter Murphy led into gambling and made a number of recommendations, including the ones around gambling advertising, which are really, really key. I'm sorry that I'm the chair, because I'm only the chair because we lost Peter Murphy to breast cancer. And I know she would have liked to have seen her recommendations acted on in that intervening period from when the report came down to now. And that is something, Mike sort of paraphrased, but I certainly think that's one thing that many of us would have liked to have achieved in our first term of government. We hope we're going to have a second term to be able to see this and many other things through. I've met with many families who have suffered from gambling, from addiction that has plagued their families. It's had financial, mental health costs, physical costs to them, marriage breakdowns. You all understand the seriousness of it for so many families. And so while I'm disappointed that there's two recommendations around gambling advertising, and Peter recommended that they be phased in, and I'm sad that we haven't been able to take that first step yet. But it is, I think if it had been easy, previous governments might have knocked it off as well. So we're not afraid to do the hard things, but we know they have to be done right, and that it is better to get them right than race in and have something that has unintended consequences. So that we know that we have not fulfilled all the recommendations. I have to say, as a committee chair, you don't actually expect any government to take every one of your recommendations, but I think there are certain recommendations in that report that are really key. What has been pleasing to see is action that we've taken that no previous government has taken on gambling. And I'm going to just give you 3 quick examples. We passed legislation to ban the use of credit cards for online gambling. That had not happened until Labor came to government. We also launched BetStop, which allows people to exclude themselves from online gambling, and that has had an uptake of more than 35,000 people so far. So that in itself is allowing people to change their own lives. And the third one that I think is key is that we've worked with the states and territories to bring in mandatory minimum classifications for computer games that have gambling-like content. And we did that. They became live in September last year. And this is how we take a preventative approach rather than waiting until someone is already hooked. So I'm very proud of the steps we've taken, and we know there's more to do. And we really hope we get a chance to do that in a second term. Oh, you're done. You were first.
Thank you. Okay, yes. So for those who aren't coping with the concept of Slido, you can submit a handwritten question using that's called a pen. Paper, you can use both. Remember that? Remember these things? I do. If you do write it, please send it to Cassie at the back, and she will take them in. Thank you so much for responding to those questions. I'm really, really hoping that we will get a solution to this gambling epidemic in the very near future. I have a number of questions that have been submitted. We probably won't get through them all. There are 28 so far, but I am going to start with the most popular ones in terms of people commenting, saying, yes, we like that question. And this one, I have changed the language a little bit. That is, what are your thoughts on the outcome on the referendum on the voice? And do you think we should have another referendum?
So, to be quite frank, I didn't have an opinion on the voice when it was first raised. I spoke with my friends they would have been benefiting from it in some way or the other, and I was asked to vote no. A friend of mine, her mum's side is Indigenous and her father's side is white, and when I said, well, what's your mum's family think and all that sort of stuff, and I was told, no, they're completely against it, can you vote no? And I said, well, okay, if that's what you want me to do. And then I said, well, I've been asked to campaign for the no side, to hand out on the day, is that going to be all right? And she did, no, yeah, please do, and can you send me photos through? So I'm a big believer when it comes to when the Australian people have their say on matters, they've had their say. So for me personally, we had the marriage equality plebiscite. If the Australian people had voted no to that, I'd accepted it. I would have accepted it. For me, they voted yes. On the referendum on the voice, we spent 18 months on that and close to $500 million on that referendum. Over 60% of Australians in every state said no. We have to accept that that was the people's choice. It was the same with the referendum on the Republic in 1999. The people said no. I don't think we should be having another one, especially at a time where people are struggling to put food on their table and pay their electricity bills, pay their rent, pay their mortgage. I just don't think that we should be spending that sort of money on another referendum when we've just had one less than 2 years ago.
I think the result of the voice referendum was catastrophic. I think it was a terrible, terrible result for the country. I have strong connections with Indigenous communities still. There was a complete untruth put around by the No campaign that Indigenous people really didn't want it. Indigenous people in remote communities in the Northern Territory voted 70% in favour, despite the fact that the only information they had, the only people who came to talk to them in their communities about the referendum itself, and I'm sad to say that some of these were church-based groups, came to encourage them to vote no. They still voted yes overwhelmingly, and they were devastated by that result. I think I find it I'm quite ashamed of that result. I think it was unwise to continue with the referendum when it didn't have bipartisan support. That's just a political tactic that I think was kind of misread. And no, we shouldn't have another one because it's not the way to go. I think we have to look for other pathways. We need to consider with truth, treaty, and justice. We need to start seriously with the truth-telling process. I've been taken in the communities where I've lived, all the communities where I've lived, to massacre sites that nobody outside that area knows about. People in those families still grieve for those massacres, and most of the Australian population has no idea. So we need to proceed to really reconcile ourselves with the Indigenous population of this country. And I'm not absolutely certain of what process we should use to get there, but it needs to happen.
I was disappointed in the outcome of the Voice because there is massive inequality that we see between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, and I don't think you achieve outcomes without having the people who are most affected being part of the solution and the journey. But we said we would do the referendum. The Prime Minister said he would do it, and he did what he said he would do. And we said we would respect the outcome of that, and we have. So we are not putting forward an idea for another referendum. That hasn't been us who's put that idea forward. If you think about how we move forward from there, this community is already doing really beautiful reconciliation work and truth-telling work. Just down the road at St John of God every year is Sorry Day, where the community comes together to remember a massacre that occurred in this community. And we were part of the Frontier Wars, and there are many sites, and some of the stories remain. Grace Carskin's history of this area captures some of those, and they're heartbreaking stories just based on what we can find evidence of. Historically accurate, based on reports in newspapers, wonderful research to do that, but those stories aren't shared. So that is part of it, but the other part of it is providing really practical programs, and that's what we've been focused on doing. We were doing that from the start of our term in government. Things like more additional Indigenous rangers, creating connection with country and allowing people to work on their country has multiple benefits. Respecting that communities need real jobs and supporting communities to do that. Supporting Indigenous tourism so that we're sharing the story of who we are, and we should be so proud that we share this land with people who've been here for more than 60,000 years, the longest continuing civilization. That's part of who we are as Australians, and no matter when we got here and how we got here, we should be really proud of that.
So I personally voted no to the Voice, and shock horror, I spent probably 10 to 15 years of my professional career working in Aboriginal communities, remote ones, such as Wilcannia and Fingal Head. In 2011, I won a fellowship and award to travel to the Republic of South Africa to study post-apartheid education and leadership in that country and take the learning, basically, how do we take a system that was entirely racist and then overnight they turned it into complete equity? What were the learnings that we could gain from that and then return them to Australia, where our school, thankfully, we had some of the biggest improvements in our school. So in terms of why I voted no, I think there's a lot of confusion, and this is an unfair hijacking where there's a confusion that if you vote no to the Voice that somehow you're inherently racist. And we're confusing it with acknowledging that there were things like massacres, attempted genocides, treating people as second-class citizens. There are many Aboriginal Australians who still live in poverty. That is not the question we're talking about. We're talking about having a voice to Parliament. It's not about acknowledging what happened. That's the work we constantly have to do. So personally, what I did is I went back to my friends in Wilcannia, the Parkinji people, and the Bundjalung up on the far north coast of New South Wales, and I said, what do you think? Give me some advice. I'm really confused about this. Because I'm sure many of you, like myself, were. And they said, Matt, not enough work has been done to get this referendum right. And we feel the way it stands right now, Aboriginal people stand to be harmed further by the division that it's caused and by the lack of, just like Terry mentioned earlier, about really getting out there to the communities and doing the referendum right. Would I be in favor of having a voice to Parliament where Aboriginal people are consulted on issues that refer to them? Absolutely, 100%.
My computer just switched off. I just have to turn it back on again. It's gone to sleep, which is not far from my bedtime either. Okay. The next most popular question is this. If you were to disagree with a policy from your own party, would you cross the floor?
Yes. It's not something that happens very often in the Greens, though, because we build policies from the ground up. We don't have them, they're not top down. So they're a process, it's a process that I first learned working in Aboriginal communities, actually. It's grassroots democracy, and it's consensus decision making. So the way we build policy is from, and we don't have a top-down structure, so the policy committees, the local branches, everything comes up from there. But if there were, when you're in a broadly based political party, you're not going to agree with everything that is in that party's platform. It's just not possible. And so there are times when you all compromise. I wouldn't cross the floor and vote, against my party just because I had a minor disagreement with something. But if it was something that was seriously against my principles, or I thought was seriously wrong, then yes, I would. But the other factor, the other side of it is, of course, that one of the advantages of voting for a political party rather than independent is that that party has a platform. And if the party puts up a platform, you vote for it, pardon me, and they get in, you to some extent you have a right to expect that the members that you elected will support that platform. So there's, it's not as easy as just saying I disagree with this, so I'll cross the floor. But it's always a consideration, but it's not something you would do without a lot of thought.
The Labor Party has a well worked through process that has stood the test of time, and that is we have a thorough democratic process that we go through prior to decisions being made on how we're voting. So I respect that democratic process. It means I have a voice on things in multiple ways. In an informal way, I can have a voice about a policy. We have caucus committees where I can have my say and discuss and influence the policy. And then we have our formal caucus meetings, just as each party has its own party room meetings. Ours is called a caucus meeting. And that's where we agree or say yes or no to a minister being able to carry forward a policy, and then we allow that minister to do that. So it's often talked about that crossing the floor in Parliament, it is one of the rarest things you've ever seen from any party. You can count on one hand the number of times it's happened in the 9 years that I've been there from any party, and I am very proud of our process, which gives us solidarity around issues. And I completely agree with Terry that you don't always have the knowledge to actually have a really personal view on some aspects of legislation. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't think Parliament needed another lawyer. There's a lot of them there. But in a policy context, I've been married nearly 40 years. My husband does not agree with me on everything. And so how on earth am I going to be in total agreement with every policy? But I respect the work that my ministers do, and in opposition, my shadow ministers. And we have an extraordinary breadth and depth of experience that leads us to do what we think will be the best possible outcome on any issue for the most people in this wonderful country that we represent.
Making the decision to run for One Nation as a candidate was absolutely agonizing. I had good friends of mine that were absolutely shocked. They were in tears. I was absolutely gutted by some of their responses. But nevertheless, when I added things up, this very reason, the ability to cross the floor and disagree with my party, was the very reason that I decided to run with them. Now, I don't agree with the other parties, but when I do look at, I want to be able to voice my, my thoughts and to share my values and beliefs. And when I looked at some of the larger parties, I do notice that there's a very strong history of voting. You go with the team and you don't cause a mess. There's obviously we've heard there's a very strategic reason for that. When I did speak to Senator Hanson, I said, hey, listen, I'm very much a strong Christian. There are going to be some places where I get my back up a little bit. And she said, Matt, we're not a Christian party, but we're a party with Christians in it. And I've already ran the gauntlet with Pauline Hanson, of all people, to argue with her around a couple of religious issues as well. So absolutely, if I had to cross the floor for my beliefs, I would without question.
So this is why I like being a Liberal, because as opposed to in the Labor Party, because if something's affecting my community and I vehemently disagree with the party's position, absolutely I would cross the floor. Because at the end of the day, you're there to represent the community. Yes, you're elected, either independent, Liberal, Greens, Labor, One Nation, Calathumpian, and you do stand with that party because you align with those party values. But at the end of the day, your job is to represent your community down in Canberra. If you just stand by and let a political party, regardless of what colour they are, bulldoze you into voting for something that will affect your community, then you are not doing your job correctly as a community representative. So if I can't back my community in when they need me to back me in, how can then I ask them to back me in at an election time? It's pretty much the way I see things, and that is my response. Thanks.
Not sure if the questions are going to get any easier. Let's see, here we go. From time to time, politicians have made comments in the public that deride a group, racial or religious. What are your thoughts on this?
I think you should judge me by my actions. You have never heard me deride any group. I treat our very diverse electorate with respect. This might be the opportunity to just state how valuable it is to have so many different community groups, and that includes church groups, religious groups, faith groups of all type, who make such a difference to this community and deserve to be treated with total respect. I mean, in this room is someone who I know, if I find someone who's in real trouble because of housing or, it might be a health crisis, I know I can ring him and say, Steve, Do you think you could help this person? Because we're working on things that we can do at a government level, but there's an immediate need. And there are multiple groups in the Hawkesbury and Blue Mountains who provide that sort of help. And many of them are faith-based. We all deserve to be respected for our differences as well as for our similarities. And judge me by my actions.
Excuse me, could I just get that question one more time? I just want to get really clear about it.
So it says, it's stated, from time to time politicians have made comments that deride some group, racial, religious, and or others. And what are your thoughts on this?
What are my thoughts on that? I think making comments about a group of people based on their religion, their looks, their background is disgusting, and I'm absolutely opposed to it. But I also beg the question, so I don't know if it's just me. I kind of see where this question's coming from. I would ask the audience to think of the principle that sits behind this. So let's just look at Senator Hanson. I don't know if you guys have heard, but she's made some pretty colorful comments in the past. So are we going to judge all the candidates and all the people who are from One Nation on the principle that someone who leads the party said something that was colorful and lacked tact, which it did? So are all the candidates and One Nation followers therefore tactless and racist because of what she said? And if that's the principle, then I also beg the question, do we then judge our other leaders who might go to church once a year, even when they were sworn in, they refused to have a Bible there, but all of a sudden they magically became Christian, and then look at that as a dishonest act, and then we judge all of their followers and their MPs for the same reason. So what's the principle? Do we judge people from One Nation based on comments that were made 30 years ago that were ugly? They were gross and they were inappropriate, and I don't stand by them. It actually runs in complete opposition to who I am as a human being, and I reject it. But I also won't wear it when we've got people from other parties that stand for things that are equally as ugly and as unacceptable. And I ask, why don't we tar everybody with the same brush there? It's not on Facebook, that's why.
So, I've just had this locally. I mentioned before what I have just gone through in the last 48 hours. I have had the Labor Mayor of the Blue Mountains and Labor councillors and Greens councillors turn around and spread some of the nastiest things about a group of people. I think that when you are in a position of leadership within the community, you need to be respectful of everybody's choices. You may not agree with those choices, you may not agree with their religious beliefs, you may not agree with, some of the comments they make or some of the actions, but to turn around and use your position in leadership to vilify a particular group of people is, to me, I don't think you should be in that position of leadership then. I have always tried to treat people with respect. I have always tried to listen to their views. I don't always agree with certain things, but I will always defend someone's right to be able to express them. What I have seen over the last 48 hours has probably been some of the most grubbiest, despicable things I have ever seen in an election campaign. And I have been doing election campaigns for close to 30 years. Some of the comments that have been made about myself is that even though I'm a happily married gay man, apparently I'm a homophobe. Some of the things that have been said about some of my volunteers and the abuse they have been given questioning what their religion is because they've got a blue shirt on. It saddens me that we have gotten to this point where people just can't volunteer and help out, that they have to be questioned and ridiculed publicly on social media in their own community. It's unacceptable.
Thanks. Yes, it is probably people from all shades of all parts of the political spectrum have made unfortunate comments from time to time. Was a Labor opposition leader many decades ago who made the comment that two Wongs don't make a white. But that sort of thing, we hope, is long in the past. One that was much more recent, and Matt didn't refer to this, but and I'm not trying to tar him with this brush at all. I totally believe that he deplores this. Is that his party leader did call Green Senator Marine Faruqi, did say to her, "Piss off back to Pakistan." But the nicest thing that happened there was Marine sued her and won.
Okay, I didn't think that one was going to be so exciting, but anyway. I think this one might be a little more exciting. What are your views on abortion? And what limits do you think a government should legislate, if any, on abortion?
What are my views on abortion? I hope I've made it clear already that I believe that God knew us when we were in the womb and life begins at conception. And I cannot sleep at night when I hear what some of the abortion laws currently are in this country. Mind you, I also realize that there are circumstances for family, and that religious institutions and my own beliefs shouldn't interfere with people's reproductive rights as well. My personal belief is I would like to abolish abortion. I just want to educate people on some pretty clear facts as well, though. We have over 80,000 abortions in Australia per annum. There are political groups that are trying to pass laws that would let our daughters access abortion services via telehealth without parental consent. That makes I'm trying to keep it cool, that makes my blood absolutely boil. It's not my kids, not my daughters. I think we need to be educated about some of the facts as well. And that while there aren't a lot of facts in terms of the data, if we look to a country like the United States, the data around pregnancies that occur as a result of incest and rape are 0.5%. It shouldn't be birth control. It has incredible impacts and effects on young expectant mothers and fathers. And the thing that most upsets me is there are people in my life, women that I love, who were forced by jerk men who didn't want to be fathers. They were forced to go and kill their kid. Where are the feminists then? Where are the people speaking up for those babies then? It's a law, so you can go and you can just do it. Just take this pill, it's okay, because don't interfere with our sexual rights. When were you standing up for the women that I love?
So, in this country, the federal government doesn't have essentially any sort of rights to do it. It's a state-based law. My personal opinion is I'm not going to sit there and tell a woman what to do with her own body. My mum's a midwife. I have seen what she deals with, and I talk to her about it, and I take my advice from her. there are circumstances when they have to choose between the mother or the baby. And I do not envy anyone who has to try and decide that. I think we get, it's become almost like a political football, this issue. We've seen it in the US, we've sort of seen it here. But my own personal opinion is I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have, I'm not going to sit there and tell a woman what to do with her own body. Personally, I would love to see that if they did go through with the pregnancy and they didn't want to keep the child, that they wanted to put it up for adoption, I would actually like to see our adoption laws a lot smoother and, because there are a lot of families out there that can't have kids, that would love to have kids, but the way our adoption works in this country is one of the most hardest things to do for a couple to be able to adopt a child. But I'm just being honest. I'm not going to sit there and tell a woman what to do with her body. So that's just me.
Thanks. Greens policy is very clear. Abortion is a part of reproductive health. It's a woman's right to choose. As Mike said, it's not up to anybody else, particularly a man, to tell her what she's going to do with her own body. That doesn't mean that we advocate abortions or that we like them or that we think they're great or there should be more of them, not at all. And there should be all kinds of programs of counselling and assistance in place to help women make these decisions. But ultimately, it's her decision, and that's what we believe.
I think women should have the right to choose, and if they do make that decision, they should have safe options that are not a threat to their lives. But I would never judge any woman for the choice that she made, and I will not tell women what they should or shouldn't do.
Okay. Next question is, how would you improve the cost of living crisis? In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes. Well, we've sort of completely flipped now. So I'm very happy with this question. So cost of living has dramatically increased over the last 3 years. One of the things that the opposition has already been pumping out, sorry to use the pun, but the 25 cents per litre off fuel. Not only will this save the family budget on average $14 a week, this will have a massive impact on the supply chain of everything. So your groceries, whether it's groceries, whether it's things getting to a hardware store, all that sort of stuff. It will have an immediate effect on day one of Parliament if a coalition government is elected. That will be the first piece of legislation that they pass. Yes, it is for 12 months, but it will be reviewed after that. Other things that they will do is, that we want to do is increase the gas reservation 20% to actually increase the baseload power here in Australia. We are sending all of our natural resources off overseas for cheapest chips, and yet we, as Australians, aren't benefiting from our own resources. I think we've seen, it sort of delves into the energy and climate change and energy consumption debate with renewables and nuclear, and it sort of gets lost that we've just seen over the last few days what's happened in Portugal and Spain and part of France, where 80% of their power comes from renewables. Renewables is great, and it should always be part of the mix, but we need to be realistic. You wouldn't invest all your money into one lot of shares. You would diversify. And that is the thing that we need to be doing with our energy market here in Australia. We need to be diversifying what we're actually doing, because to be honest, we have not had a serious adult conversation about our future energy needs in this country. We have not set the energy market up for future generations. There's a lot of people in this room that by the time renewables will be gone, so will they, no offence, we need to set up energy for the next 100 years, and that's why we need a diversification.
I was just going to say, have you seen the price of chips recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have some issues with what Mike said, but mainly about the fact that there's more to it than the cost of living when you're talking about whether we choose renewables. There's also the issue of climate change, which is in itself is going to have a huge effect and is having already a huge effect on the cost of living. We all attended a forum on in Windsor on the rising cost of insurance as a result of the climate emergency. And insurance companies don't have an agenda. They don't have a political agenda, and they're amoral. Actually, they don't have an agenda at all. All they do is calculate risk, and they use the best data and the best research, and they tell us exactly what it's going to cost. And they are saying insurance is going to go so high that many properties in Australia, many companies, many financial enterprises will be uninsurable, and that's going to make the cost of living soar. Other things that the Greens will do to address the cost of living is make school education, in fact all education from early childhood through to university, absolutely free. That we will ban unjustifiable rent raises. We will cap rent rises so that people are not forced out of their homes. We will make it free for everybody to see their GP. And we will make the big corporations in this country, 1 in 3 corporations in this country, by the way, don't pay any tax. We will make all of those corporations pay their fair share so that we can fund all these things. And those will be some of the biggest contributions to reducing the cost of living.
Hands up if you or someone in your family has a mortgage. So you were top of mind when we came to government and found that inflation was running rampant with prices going that way. We needed to bring inflation down so that the Reserve Bank was had better options in terms of what they could do to bring down interest rates. And we've obviously seen the first interest rate cut, and the predictions are that there will be more. And that has been the challenge that we've had, to bring inflation down, to get wages up, which they are, and to keep unemployment low, because the worst thing you can do for someone's cost of living is lose them their job. And what we've been able to do and oversee in the 3 years in government is an increase of 1 million jobs. And now 4 out of 5 of those jobs are coming from the private sector. And along with tax cuts for every worker, energy bill relief for every household, cheaper medicines, because people who take a lot of medicine need as much help as we can provide, cheaper childcare, because that way families are better supported. Boosts to Commonwealth rent assistance for the most vulnerable in our community. And we cut student debt. But we know there's much, much more to do. We are already transitioning to the cheapest form of energy, and that's renewables. And that transition is underway. But we have further tax cuts for people coming, not just for 1 year or one-off, but things that will continue to flow through and save people money so they keep more of what they earn. There's an extra $150 in energy relief coming in the back half of the year. There's more bulk billing so people can see a GP for free. And if you know someone who is under 16 or on a Commonwealth health card, We've tripled the incentive to GPs in the term of government that we've had so that they are more likely to be bulk billed, and we're seeing those rates turn around. But what we need to do is see everybody of every age bulk billed, and that's why we'll be increasing the incentive to GPs from the 1st of January, so they get the same incentive to do bulk billing for the general population as they do for the younger and the older. We're bringing medicines down to $25. That's the price you paid in 2004. And if you've got a university debt, we're cutting that by 20%. So they are some of the measures that we've already put in place and want to have the opportunity to do so that we fundamentally support people while we're tackling the economic challenges and that inflation rate. It's a joy to see today that it's stayed in the Reserve Bank's range, and one of the big underlying rates has come down to the Reserve Bank's target range.
We'll let you. When I arrived in Australia as an immigrant in the mid-90s, John Howard was in office. At that time, our government was actually in surplus. Today, the current debt's looking at about $1.5 trillion. They also allowed 76,000 migrants through the gates. I'm proudly one of them, and it wasn't because there was any sort of secret agenda. It's that that's what our country could afford. That was the influx that we could afford at that time. Currently, we're looking at between 500 and 700,000 people arriving in this country per annum. I know that people are concerned about housing estates encroaching on the Hawkesbury as well. It is a big issue for all of us. So one of the things that One Nation would do is we would slow down immigration to a level that's going to be manageable. The other thing is, I just want to point out that while it's great to give everybody free school and give everybody tax cuts, what we don't talk about is the fact is, guess who's paying for it? You are. It's our tax dollars that are going to pay for all this free school, and we're going to tax the people that are working harder. We're going to tax them more, so people are going to be less inclined to try to push ahead. So now to jump right to the question is, what are we going to do to fix the cost of living? Over the last 6 years, Pauline Hanson and One Nation have gone through the federal expenditure, and they've worked back and forth with Treasury and redlined duplicity programs that we can do without, and arguably they've taken out over up to $90 billion worth of needless expenditure. They're looking at taking half of that and paying the budget back, and the other half is going to come back into people's pockets. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I did say we will finish at 9 o'clock, and we are going to finish at 9 o'clock. There were still 30 questions that were not answered. My apologies for those people who submitted those. Some of them were repeats, but I think it was good to hear from our politicians. So thank you, Susan, Mike, Terry, and Matthew for coming out on such a night. We are grateful that you were candid in your approach and your thoughtfulness of your answers. Thank you to the audience as you sat and listened intently. I hope this has been useful for you, because there's only a few days before you're going to have to do something on a piece of paper. You remember that stuff? Yep. We have it at school still, by the way. It's not all this. I am now going to ask Rick, who is going to pray for us.
G'day, I'm Rick from Richmond Anglican Church. Jono began the night by encouraging us towards wisdom in the way that tonight has been conducted, and I think it's been encouraging to see that that has been the case, and we should thank God for that, and also pray for our wisdom now in how we go out and vote. Also want to give thanks to these guys for their time this evening, so will you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the tone of the conversation this evening. We thank you for the graciousness of the candidates and the questions, and we pray that that will continue to be the case throughout the remainder of the campaign. Father, we do thank you that we live in a country where we are able to participate in the process of choosing our political leaders. And so as we prepare to vote, we pray that you'll give each one of us here and all people in our country wisdom and love. Help us to share your heart for justice and of concern for the weak and vulnerable. Father, thank you for these candidates who have put themselves forward to represent us. And you tell us to pray for and to submit to those in authority. And so we pray for whoever is elected, both in our electorate and in the nation more broadly. We pray that you'll help them to make decisions that are for the good of the nation and of all people, and not just for political gain. We ask that their concerns will reflect your concerns, that they will have a heart for justice and mercy and the courage to stand up and be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. We thank you for the freedoms that we currently have in this country, and we ask that we'll continue to have the freedom to live as followers of Jesus for those of us who are. Father, there is no better news than the love, forgiveness, and salvation that you offer through Jesus. Please enable us to be both free and willing to share that news with others. And also give us both confidence and comfort that all political leaders lead under your rule and that you are in control of everything, whether we like the outcomes or not. Father, we pray that this will enable us to live with confident trust in you and as good citizens of this country. Amen.
About to use the bigger voice that I had. Thank you for coming. Are you going to hang around for a little while for people to ask questions? So there is tea and coffee. Is it still on? Okay, there is still tea and coffee. We will wind up in the near future, but if you've got an individual question you'd like to ask them, please feel welcome, and please help us thank them for their attendance.